welcome to another episode of The Hump with Katie. I'm your host, Katie Thiroux, and today I have an incredible episode for you with the bassist, acoustic bassist, electric bassist, composer, educator, and one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, John Patitucci. If you're new to The Hump, this is a series where I interview some of the world's greatest artists and performers and find out why are they so amazing, how did it happen, how did they become who they are today, and ultimately, what can we learn from them? We've already had some amazing guests on the show, like John Clayton, Larry Grenadier, Phoebe Russell, Joseph Conyers, David Allen Moore, Scott Colley, Christian McBride, and also some non-bassists like Walter Smith III, Kemp Peplowski, Justin Coughlin, and so many others. You can listen to these episodes and so many others on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, and also you can go watch them on YouTube. So go like, download, subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know who you want to hear from next. Before I bring you today's episode, I would love to thank our sponsors. And first up, we have Jams World. You guys know how much I absolutely love Jams World. I'm wearing it right now. And the reason why I love it is because the fabric is made from 100% spun crushed rayon, and it's light and it keeps me cool while I'm playing. And it's totally unique artwork that's screen printed right onto the fabric. I always feel like I'm wearing a piece of art made just for me. Go to their website, jamsworld.com, and use the promo code JAZZ15, and you'll get 15% off your entire purchase. Next up, I would love to thank Colstein's String Shop. Colstein's have been family owned and operated since the 1940s, and they now have 3 incredible locations, 2 of which are on Long Island, and one of those is meant to be interactive, so you can take your family there and they can learn all about the string family. And they just opened up a new shop right in Columbus Circle in New York City. It's so beautiful, and if you know them, they have an amazing online shop. Go to colstein.com and use the promo code KATIE10, and you'll get 10% off your entire online purchase. Before I bring you today's interview with John Patitucci, I wanted to say thank you so much for subscribing and listening and downloading and being patient while I took a little bit of a break from doing interviews so that I can come back strong and bring you more incredible, even more amazing shows this year. I'm back, we're back, so I'm going to be bringing you new episodes every single week, every hump day, that's Wednesday. So be sure to go to the Instagram and YouTube, subscribe and download so that you can stay up to date on every episode. Okay, here's today's episode with John Patitucci. He's someone who really doesn't need much of an intro at all. You either know him from his fusion playing with Chick Corea with the electric band, or playing with Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hankcock. His own music, his own band. I had so much fun getting to talk with John because it turns out that those were his life goals, to play with Wayne Shorter, Chick Corea, Herbie Hankcock, and it's all happened and so much more. He's so kind and just an incredible, amazing bass player and musician. So I'm just going to get right to it today. So without further ado, here is John Patitucci.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
You know, thank God, safe and sound. How about you?
Exactly the same, right?
That's good. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for taking some time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's nice to finally really kind of meet you. I've only seen your picture up at school.
Oh. Oh, cool.
There's
That's
a big
awesome.
poster up in one of the rooms that I teach in of you with your bass.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. I love Berklee. That's just a side note.
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed, especially being involved in Danilo's Institute. It's been amazing. Now for, I don't know, 10 years I've been doing it already.
Really? It's been that long?
Yeah. And it's great, over 10 years actually. And then could be 11 now, or maybe even 12. But the stuff with, and with Steve too, Bailey, I think he's been doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, he's I like him a lot, and especially the direction, he moves things in, and he's very open.
Yeah, and really good at getting things done. Boy, his just administrative thing also, as well as being a really great musician. It's really impressive.
And he keeps it cool.
Yeah. So now, are you out on the West Coast now?
Yeah, I'm actually in Long Beach, California.
Wow, that's the last place that I lived before I moved from the West Coast. I'm originally from New York, but I did live in the West Coast for a long time, and I lived in Belmont Shore for a while.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm not far from there. And I actually did my master's at Cal State Long Beach.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. When I was there, it was Abe Luboff was my teacher.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I was there in 1970, sort of the fall of 78, 79, and 79, 80. So 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
my sophomore and junior uh, year, and then he was trying to get me to quit playing jazz and electric and everything else, and just be a strictly symphonic bass player. And that's when I left and went on the road. I was 19.
Yeah. 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 I was wondering how you got to Long Beach. Was it because of Abe Luboff, or was there another opportunity?
You know, our family, I was raised in East Flatbush in Brooklyn. I was born in 59. So from 59 to 69, roughly, I was in East Flatbush. And then we moved to Long Island for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was commuting to his insurance job in the city. And it was brutal. Like, in those days, the trains would catch fire, and
Yeah.
the Long Island Expressway was the Long Island Express with terrible traffic. So they said, okay, you could go to California. And then this is 1972, we moved to California. The land of
Oh.
opportunity, flowing with milk and honey. It was like
Yeah.
happening. So we went. And I remember going to the Bay Area first.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in the Bay Area. And that was incredible time to be in the Bay Area in the 70s. Tower of Power, Herbie was making those records.
Mm-hmm.
I was hearing, my brother and I would go into the city to places like the Great American Music Hall and Todd Barkin's place,
Oh, Keystone.
Keystone Corner. And it was amazing, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see McCoy and all these people, I got to see Art Blakey and the Jazz Message, all these people, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, big band, I saw them play with Rufus on bass and also with George Mraz. And so we were going crazy. We got to hear all this great music. And but then I went my first year at San Francisco State, and I studied with Charles Siani, who was the big guru up there for everybody. He was the associate principal of the San Francisco Symphony and principal of the opera.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a dynasty unto himself,
Yeah.
So I had a mentor named Chris Poehler, who he pronounced his name Chris Paler, but he was an incredible musician. I still keep in touch with him. He lives in Northern California. He was big on the San Francisco scene. He got to play with people like with Wes Montgomery and he played with Chet Baker and all kinds of people. So he got me really into jazz. When I was 13, I met him. I had heard some jazz records that my grandfather brought home when we were in New York, and that's the first time I ever heard Wayne on a Art Blakey record called Mosaic, and Wes Montgomery records with Ron and Herbie and Grady Tate, and all these cool records. And my brother and I were like, because we were rock and roll, and R&B. I was really into R&B, Motown, and all that. I started off on electric when I was 10. And then, so when we moved to California, Northern California was a really fertile time for us. I was in my brother's band. My brother's a guitarist and a pastor. A great guy, amazing. He's kind of my hero in life. So he had a band, and when I was old enough to be in the band, I started playing in the band. I was probably, 13. And then I met Chris, and we lived up there. And then my dad got another chance to have another kind of promotion in business. So we went to Southern California.
Oh.
And at that point, that was 1978, in the summer of 78, I believe. So, it was kind of crazy. I had done 1 year of college at San Francisco State. Then we left. So I was studying classical bass for a year. Then we went down there. And I remember somebody telling me there was a guy whose parents lived on our street in Northern California, and he was really tight with Robin Ford. And also people like Jimmy Cox. Yeah. And all these people so Jimmy was tied in with all these guys in Long Beach, in that area, Long Beach State, and people like, because of him, he told me, don't go to Northridge, go to Long Beach State.
Okay.
He goes, Northridge they have a very tight band that's very clean, but in Long Beach, they swing, so I said, okay, I'm going down there then. And then, so my parents settled in Huntington Beach. So for 4 years we lived there. I lived there, they stayed, but then I moved up to town. But I went to Long Beach State for 2 years, immediately Jay Anderson was there. He was leaving to go to New York. So I inherited all these gigs that he had because he was going to go away. He was already traveling with Woody Herman and then Carmen McRae, and then he was leaving. So I met Mike Higgins, John Ferraro, Chad Wackerman, Jimmy Cox, Dave Hawker, Dave Witham. All these guys became my family, music. And I was playing gigs at the Studio Cafe in Balboa Peninsula and driving up to town to play jazz gigs with a lot of the older musicians, and also started working into the studios. In 1982, I moved up to LA. And that was a big deal, and started playing with a ton of people. And I was very fortunate.
What a time it was.
Yeah, it was crazy, right? And I was very blessed, and I still can't, work out how this all happened. I always laugh because my mother used to say it best. People would make a big deal after everything went well with Chick and everything, and they said, "Oh, your son," and she goes, "Oh, he's just my John."
Yeah.
My mom was great. She died young. She was 63 when she passed away. So, but for me, I'm still this kid from East Flatbush in Brooklyn. I really kind of shake my head about it, and I go, God was really opening all these doors, and people would enter my life at just the right time, and we were plopped into these places. Those people, all those people I just named were amazing musicians.
Oh, yeah.
And we were really dedicated to playing jazz, as well as we weren't just about trying to become good in studio musician. Like up there, when I got up there, everybody wanted to be a studio musician.
Yeah.
Not everybody even valued jazz music.
Yeah.
They were the faithful, like Billy Childs, who I met, and people like John Clayton, who studied with Abe Luboff too. So that's
exactly.
So Abe was a great teacher for me because he etude me to death and made me play all these solos in literature and everything. So much so that he was convinced that I was just going to throw everything else out of the way and play classical music, because John did that so faithfully at first.
Yeah,
he didn't throw it away, but he went over to Denmark or Holland, became principal bass of an orchestra. That's what Abe wanted me to do. Move the jazz over here for a little bit and do his way first. Yeah, and I was the rebellious.
But isn't it funny? Not funny, but like you can totally get both done. Or
yes. I really worked hard to do both.
Yeah. And I don't think it's never really the other way around, where a classical musician, in my experience, is like, okay, I'm going to really shed, the jazz thing and do that. It's usually the other way around, because I was the same way in high school. Maybe I thought, just do the classical thing, but it was just like, well, you could do both, and of course they complement each other.
Yeah. Oh, very much. So where did you go to high school?
I went to Hamilton High School. Billy Childs went there. I mean, much earlier than I did. But yeah, I went to Hamilton.
Did Mike Elizondo go there too? He may have gone.
He might have gone to the other Loxa.
He's a really. I remember when he was a young lad, he used to come to my gigs and ask me questions, and I loved him. Like, he was really great even when he was a kid. And I'm so proud of what he's a big producer and all that now. He's a great bass player though. Yeah. So were you in around the same? I don't know how old you are, so I know you're a lot younger than me because everybody is now.
No, I graduated high school in 2006.
Yeah.
But still, LA. I mean, everything's different now, but I feel really lucky to have grown up at the end of that cusp where I could go see music every night of the week. My mom would sit with me at the bar. I actually remember seeing you. My mom dropped us off at the old Catalina's.
Yes.
And she sat in the car, and my brother also plays bass, and we just went in and, watched you. So she would do that, anytime there was music, or at the Jazz Bakery. I love it. Oh, because someone would come 5 nights a week. So I feel really lucky to have still grown up in that time, and my high school was right around the corner from Jazz Bakery. So I drove to school, and then I would just hang out at the Jazz Bakery and every night of the week.
That's so cool. So where did you guys live, in Culver City or
No, we lived in Chatsworth.
Oh my God, that's a drive.
Yeah.
coming over the hill and
Oh
wow,
yeah. So
that's a commitment.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we did everything at Hamilton. I went to the Colburn School before it is what it is now. It used to be like in a warehouse at
Right.
USC. Yeah. So yeah, LA. There's the whole East Coast, West Coast thing. People have something in their head about it, but it has something. Everything has something to offer. So I feel, and I was at the right place at the right time, like you said too,
Yeah.
to be able to receive it as well.
Well, and that's the irony about even though I'm a New Yorker and I always held on to that. When I moved up to LA, the musicians that I got to play with were all from New York anyway. They all moved out there. It was Chick, Herbie, Wayne, Freddie Hubbard, and then also the great. In the studios, I got to learn from all these incredible West Coast guys,
Mm-hmm.
men and women who but hardly anybody grew up there at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody was from somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but there were natives too, like Dave Stone was
Yeah.
a buddy of mine, and Carlos Vega,
Mm-hmm.
and there were of course, there were incredible musicians in LA. Billy Childs was I met him when I was very young, and I remember trying to play those bass parts that he wrote and was like, oh, this guy's a real composer,
Yeah.
So I met so many people that were great on the West Coast, but they were not necessarily always, except for when I got in the studios and learned from all those other people. The jazz musicians were in a different place almost. Like, when I
Yeah.
first started going in the studios, they would say, don't tell me you play jazz.
Yeah.
Don't say anything about it. And yet in between takes, everybody was jamming, trying to play jazz.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, this is really weird. But there were great people like Jim Keltner helped me get jobs. And there was a lot of people. So who did you study with?
Well, I grew up studying with a classical bassist. My first teacher was actually Dr. David Young, who's still at the Colburn
Yes.
School.
Yeah.
So I started with him when I was 8 years old, classical bass, and it was
That's
just
amazing.
one of the greatest. Just lets you explore the instrument. I just remember I played violin before, and he gave it to me, didn't tell me anything, and I just made a sound with the bow, and it was just like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
And then I studied with another bassist. He's still in the LA Phil, Peter Roffet.
I know who that is. Sure.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I liked him because I was tiny, and he was tiny, and he played French bow, which I did too, which was always like that's also another point of contention: French bow, German bow.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get to study with a jazz teacher until the very end of high school. I sought out Kristen Korb.
Oh yeah.
And
And
then
she sings too.
yeah, and then John Clayton. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
and that's a never-ending lesson. Yeah.
he's amazing. And I remember meeting him because we were both, students of Abe, and Abe was praising him and saying how great he was, and then I got to meet him, and of course I fell in love with him. And I remember when we were still going to school at Long Beach, going to Carnation Gardens at Disneyland to see him play with Basie.
Yeah.
We were like, there he was, one of our friends playing with Count Basie. Incredible.
Yeah. And I'll go back a little bit in a second, but look, what was your goal when you moved to LA? Were you just kind of like, I just want to play music. I want to, whatever comes my way, I'm going to take it. Or did you have some sort of thing in mind?
I think I knew because I had already been driving up and doing some gospel sessions. And I was thinking, these guys are teaching me a lot about, and because I also had that love for groove and R&B bass playing and compositional thinking on the bass, whether it was electric or acoustic, because my first heavy influences were Ron and Ray.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wanting to be like those heroes, and I wanted to develop that kind of thing. But there were jazz musicians like crazy up in LA at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So many people living there that were my heroes. And I got to play also with some of the West Coast famous, guys like John Guerin and but also guys that were sort of like singular, like I played with Lenny Bro, who was this ridiculous guitar player, and I played with George Van Epps. And when I played with them, I didn't even realize, because I was so young, how, what the gravity that they had with them. I was just like, wow, these guys are wild. I was like,
Yeah.
But, and I got to play with a lot of people like Claire Fisher and Oscar Castroneves, and I got all involved with these Brazilian guys too. Started calling me, and that was incredible. I think my goal at the time when I went up there was to do studio work, but I really wanted to play jazz and also be involved in the fusion scene at the Big Potato also. But I was sort of very eclectic always, and playing. I got in the studios pretty early. I was playing in bass sections because of my training, but also I wound up playing with Joe Farrell, which was a key thing for me.
Oh, I want to
When
hear
I played
about
with Joe Farrell, that was huge because he was amazing, first of all, and he was on those records. I was already a Chick Corea fan and a Herbie fan, those records with Miles and Ron and Tony and all that. So Joe, I started playing in Joe's band, and he got me the gig with Airto and Flora, which was a huge, all of a sudden one day, he got me the gig, and Airto calls one day, he goes, yeah, Joe says, you're good, and I want you to come up to my house in, it was up in Santa Barbara. Laura and I live up there, so come up there. I'll teach you how to play Brazilian music. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because I heard him on Light as a Feather, and I heard him on his record with Tombo and Seven and all this crazy stuff. And he was a hero. So I went up there, and he sat me down, and he taught me, this is the way you really play samba. This is the way you play Partito Alto. This is the way you play Baio. He just went down the list that he was playing. So whenever he started playing one of those rhythms, it was like, wow. And I played my little part, and it was like, wow, it works perfect, because then I would try to play it with some other drummer who was like, something's missing.
Yeah.
So that was huge. But see, the thing about Joe is I kept bugging Joe, saying, when is Chick Corea going to have auditions? I knew somehow, as a young, foolish young man, I knew that there was something about Chick and his eclecticism that would really enable me to grow on both instruments. I knew it. I didn't know why I knew it. Doesn't make a lot of sense that I knew that. I really wanted to play with him. The people that I really wanted to play with were him, Herbie, and Wayne, and also, Freddie. Yeah, and I got to play with all of them, and lots of other people too. But that's why I say this is a God thing, because I had no idea what I was doing, and I wasn't like some marketing guy. Well, I could market myself, and I had no idea what I was doing. I just had these dreams. Yeah, I was a very kind of emotionally oriented and very kind of a stargazer, like, dreaming about these things that were these heroes. So eventually, because the first road gig I got when I was 19, when I left school, when Abe Luboff said, no, you have to stop doing all that and start working on the list and learn excerpts and do, audition for the LA Philharmonic. He said, and I was kind of looking at it, I'm like, and I didn't know what to say because I was very respectful. I was taught that, I come from a very strict Italian family that was like, your elders and all that. So but he said something that I'll never forget. It's hilarious to me now, and you're going to crack up. I said, he could see that I wasn't really buying into the thing, and I didn't know what to say. And I was kind of like, well, I can't, and he said, when are you going to get tired of playing those upholstered saloons? Oh, man. And I was like, I didn't know what to say, really. And so in my heart and in my mind, I was already saying, maybe never. Yeah. Get tired of those places. So I just was very respectful, and I just quit school. Yeah. I was already playing and growing and going up, and I had already been on the road once. Between the sophomore and the junior year, I got a gig with Gat Mangione, of all
Oh,
people,
cool.
Chuck's brother,
Yeah.
who played piano. And the funny thing about it is, because of that, I met Gail Moran, Chick's wife, at a jam session at Chuck Mangione's house. He would have these bebop jam sessions because he really liked to play bebop, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Gail was there blowing and she was playing, and Chick always said that her style was fairy bop because she was like really light, but she could play.
Yeah.
She's a great musician and can sing too. And she was blowing, and then we were playing, and she went home and told Chick about this little kid that she heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first inkling that he had that there was some guy out there that was a total fanatic for him, but who played bass.
Well, that's what it takes.
What's that?
That's what it takes, you know, just him knowing
Yeah.
that you have that intense desire.
Yeah, and that was crazy because, you know, I freaked out when she was there. I didn't know she was going to be there.
Mm.
So the weird thing about that was then she held on to that, and they used to have these Valentine's Day parties at their house every February, you know, Valentine's Day, and they would have desserts and all this stuff, and they would invite people to come. And I was playing in Victor Feldman's trio. That's the other guy that I forgot to mention. That was a very pivotal person, also one of my heroes already.
Yes.
He wrote Seven Steps. So I get in Victor's trio, and he was a real sage mentor in my life because he saw that I really wanted to get in the studios and everything also. And he said, yeah, don't worry, that's fine. You can do that. But don't lose sight of, you know, what you know, all the jazz music and what you want to do there, because he said, you're going to get in the studios and you're going to realize that's a great thing, but it's only a certain thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think, he said, knowing you and who you are and your aspirations, I don't think that's going to be all you want to do. Yeah. And I was, you know, a lot of people were telling me, because it was LA, oh yeah, you got to get in the studios. So I was like, okay, I'll get in the studios. I didn't even know what that meant yet. Yeah. I mean, I knew that it was, you know, playing on records and all kind of things, and that was exciting. So I get with Victor, and he's giving me a lot of sage advice because he's been through it all. He played with Miles, and, you know, and I think he was playing with Cannonball, and then he was playing with Miles, and then his wife was an amazing lady, and she was really strong, and she was the anchor of that family. In fact, she died in 84. He died in 85, I think, or 83 and 84. I remember because I'd been with him, and she died of an aneurysm on the tennis court or something like that. She was really sharp. She kind of controlled, you know, she was the anchor of that family. She was very strong. He was kind of sickly sometimes. He would get sick a lot. He was brilliant. Yeah. But physically, I think he was more vulnerable. Mm-hmm. She was strong. She, you know, played tennis. Yeah. Dropped dead on a brain aneurysm on the tennis court one day. Gone. He was destroyed after that. He was, you know, I was with him the night he died. Wow. I mean, he died later in the evening, but we were working at his studio playing something with his son on drums, because I did that one record with him, which a lot of people heard. Later on, I found out guys in New York had even heard it, but it was a To Chopin with Love. Mm-hmm. All these arrangements that he did, it was really cool. Well, we were doing another record, and he said to me, you know, I don't feel so great. And I was like, man, are you all right? He said, well, I think I have medication and I'll be okay. I'll see you tomorrow. So I said, okay. And I went home, and the next morning, as I was getting ready to leave my place, I was living in Van Nuys at the time. And in a very funky place. Anyway, so I was a little late getting out, and I was never late. Yeah. Anything, almost never in my life have I been late. But this day I was running a little behind. The phone rang, and it was Trevor, his son. And I pick up the phone. I said, Trev, I'm so sorry. I'm leaving the house right now. I'm going to be a little late. But he said, no, stop. He said, what do you mean? He said, my dad died last night. And I was like, crushed, you know. So, okay, go back to the other thing. So there I am in Victor Feldman's trio playing with his son in Chick's house, because he invites us to come and hang and be, you know, he would invite certain people to also, if they wanted to play, because he was a big fan of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there I am playing trio with Victor Feldman in Chick's living room. How does that happen, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and of course, Gail says, this is the kid I was telling you, and so we meet, and he was really nice. And later, she told me that night, she said, I want to help this kid.
Mm.
So it was out like the next year, I think the next Valentine's Day party, he invites me to come play in a chamber orchestra because he's rehearsing to play the Mozart double piano concerto with Keith Jarrett in Japan. It's going to be. So he's working his butt off like he was a real practicer. So way before the fact, he gets a chamber orchestra together in his house just so that he can play the stuff, So we played that too, and I'm, I was into it. I was trained pretty well for that sort of thing. And I mean, I love it, and it's part of my heritage too. I heard opera in the house when I was a kid, and I loved classical music. I just didn't want to exclusively do that alone. And it's ironically, in the last 20, 25 years, I've become very active in that in New York and writing and composing, playing chamber music and doing all kinds of stuff. So, but at that point, there I am in his house again. We do the Valentine's Day, and he goes, he comes up to me afterwards, and he goes, I can see that you play the acoustic bass well, and I like that, and I see, he heard me playing a trio, and he also heard me play classical music. So he said, but I wonder, do you play electric bass? I have this band that I want to start, and it's electric, and in my young mind, right, I'm thinking, but I want to play trio with Chick. I want but I was originally electric bassist first. So I said, I actually started on that, and I still do a lot of that in town, and I'm pretty active doing that. And he goes, well, could you send me some examples of you doing that?
Mm.
So this was kind of a trip I put together. I had played on a Claire Fisher record where I had a little solo on a samba, and some tapes from the Baked Potato, me playing with various people, and because I played in Larry Carlton's band before this, like in '83, I was in Carlton's band. And actually, even before that, I also played in the Crusaders for 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
When they had gotten rid of Styx and they were going through all these drummers like water, and it was crazy. I learned a lot, but it was painful that period. So I got with Larry, and that was encouraging again. Larry was cool, and so I had some recordings of that too. So I sent him to Chick. And one day he calls my house, and he said, man, I'm listening to the stuff you gave me, and I really like it. And we talked for a while, and then he says, okay, bye. And I'm thinking, oh, boy, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah, I liked it, but.
Yeah.
He didn't say that.
Mm.
But I think he was listening to a bunch of different cats. Everybody, including Miroslav, wanted the gig. So then I used to do these, did a fair amount of recording at this place called Weddington Studios, where we did a lot of gospel records, and Abraham Laboriel would get me on stuff, and I had gotten to know all these crazy Oklahoma guys that played with Andre Crouch.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like the same thing with Aretha Franklin and the guys from, was it the Muscle Shoals guys?
Yeah, I think
they
so.
were all these guys that looked like farmers. They were all white, and they were funky. And she loved them. Mm-hmm. So these guys were kind of like those guys. They played with Andre Crouch. That was his band. Mm-hmm. Like the rhythm section were these guys. So I was on these sessions with Hadley Hawkinsmith and Harlan Rogers and either Bill Maxwell on drums or Keith Edwards, a young guy, also from Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. All these crazy guys from Oklahoma. And they used to call me Patty. Hey, Patty. Could you play a different groove on the bridge? Because that's too much, too busy. And I was like, okay. And they taught me a lot about how to be a pocket player and all this. I was into that already, but these guys were amazing. Mm-hmm. Like you put a chart in front of them and immediately they come up with a beautiful part. Mm. Hadley was incredible, and they played with Andre. So they were funky. They really had a nice feel. So anyway, I'm at the studio one day doing some gospel record with probably those guys. Can't remember who I was in there with that day. And Wally Grant was an engineer who worked in there. He worked with a lot of people. He was really good, funny, and very sarcastic. So I'm in the lounge out in front of the front part of the studio, away from the actual recording rooms. And I'm sitting there. I don't know why. I'm just sitting there, and the intercom thing goes off, and the phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's Wally. He goes, "Okay, all right, Patitucci, Chick Corea's on the phone for you." And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks, Wally, you jerk. Stop." Click.
Yeah.
And he does it again. I go, "Come on, man, this is really tired, man. I'm not having this." Click. And he rings again. He goes, "You idiot, pick up the line. It's really him." And I was like, so this is comical. What he says is comical, and I'll never forget it, because it's so, about, where I came from and what happened. So he says, "I know you're busy doing a lot of recording sessions and stuff, but I'm wondering if you would consider joining my band." I was like, I wanted to jump through the phone, and, I wanted to just scream, "Yes, I'll be over in 5 minutes."
Yeah, like you have no idea.
I didn't know what to say, and I just said, "Of course, and so that was it. Little did I know that this thing was going to be something kind of big. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was just excited. I was the first one he hired in that band.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when I got the gig, I was saying, "Well, yeah, let's get Vinnie Colaiuta on drums," and and he was like, "No, Mike Brecker recommended this guy who's in New York right now." And I asked Mike Brecker who the greatest young drummer is in New York, and he, without missing a beat, he just said Dave Weckl. So I said, "Okay." I didn't know who Dave Weckl was. I remember sometime after that mentioning it to Dave Garfield, who was, and he said, "Oh yeah," because he was from St. Louis. He said, "Oh, I know about him. He's really good." And so Chick and I were playing. The funny thing was, the first gig, this was before Dave came out and before I met Dave. He couldn't get out in time. He was on the road or something. And Chick said, "Okay, the first gig we're going to do is the Merv Griffin show." I was like, "Okay." And it's going to be me and Herbie, you and Tommy Breckline. And I was like, "Herbie?"
Yeah.
So there I was. I was 25 years old, sitting there with my instruments, both instruments, like I wanted. And we're on the Merv Griffin show. Mm-hmm. And I look across the stage, and not only is Chick there, but Herbie's there. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, did I die and go to heaven? What? What is going on here? Like, really, like Cinderella, this was like, what? And I was freaked out. I was so excited, and you can see that. You can find that on YouTube. Yeah. It's hysterical. And they're blowing, and because they had both won awards in the Contemporary Keyboard Magazine poll, or whatever. So that's how it started. And even though I had played up to that point, I had played with a bunch of people in LA, the Brazilians. I played with Joe Farrell. I played some with Freddie, I think, by then. Tom Scott, all these guys, John Guerin and all these people, Dave Grusin and Lee Ritenour, I think, by then. And different people. I was playing with older jazz drummers like Roy McCurdy, who was amazing. Yeah. I was just getting to play with all these people. Jeff Hamilton too. People like also Frank Severino, who was a really good player. Oh yeah. I think I played with. I'm trying to remember if I had played with Monty Alexander by then. I'm not sure, but I did a lot of stuff with singers too. I played with Herb Jeffries, who had sung with Ellington at the old Vine Street Bar and Grill. I used to play with Mose Allison when he would come into town. I played with a ton of people. I played for Ruth Price. Yeah. I played for all these different people. I was a sideman. I played at the old Carmelo's. I used to play there at Dante's, the place out in Glendale, the Italian restaurant, with John Tirabasso, the drummer who had a gig there, and all these people. All these people. And I think also Scott Colley used to do some of those gigs too. He was younger than me, but he was already playing great. So that was sort of what happened in LA. And from there, and then I got the gig with Chick, and he got me a record deal. Like I would be at the studio plunking around on the piano, and I would show him my tunes that I was writing.
Yeah.
And one day he said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm just writing these tunes." And he goes, "Well, you should have a band and you should be making records." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Nobody's going to sign me. I'm a bass player, you know." And he said, "I'll take care of that." And he did. He got me a record deal with GRP, and that was the beginning of it. Like the first record, they made him produce it. They said, "Well, we want to hear demos." And he said, "You'll hear the record when it's done." He like went to bat for me immediately.
Yeah.
And then they said, "Well, you have to produce it." He goes, "I'll produce it." And then he came to me and said, "Yeah, they want me to produce it, but really, I know you know what you want to do musically, so I'm just here to help you. I'm going to teach you how to make records." And I was like, "Well, will you play on the record?" You know, and he did, you know, but he taught me how to make records, how to like stay on budget, how to be organized, and he was very organized.
With Chick, when you first started playing with him, did he also give you that experience like with the other musicians and bands you played with, like this is how I want you to do it, or this is how it works, or was it totally a creative experience together?
Well, the thing about Chick is if you play bass, that's the freest chair in the band, I think. And you can see from the people that came before me, like Stanley, you know, Miroslav, Eddie Gomez, you know, it was intimidating. Anthony Jackson, all these people have a very strong sense of their own voice. He really opened the door for me to find something personal. His music brought that out in me. Yeah, I think. Also, the funniest thing was, you know, the first when it was a trio. The electric band at first was just me and Weckl and Chick, right? So we get in there with him. You know, he starts bringing in these tunes, and at that point, you know, I was used to blowing through changes. I was very into bebop and everything, and playing on acoustic or electric. I was really, I thought I was fluid enough, but then he pulls out one of those tunes. His tunes have hard changes, right? So he starts to play one of those tunes, and then he's blowing, and you're like, "Wow, sounds easy." Then it's my turn. And you're two things happen. First of all, you feel like you're stepping in mines and getting blown up every third bar with the harmonic leads moving around. And then the comping is like being in the ring with Ali. And you're just like, you're getting blown off the stage. Like, and it's so strong that I felt like, wow, the comping is way more powerful, way more interesting than my solo. I'm going to have to get stronger and be more definitive. When I play my melodies, I'm going to have to mean it and make them stick. Yeah. Like, I need to get much stronger. This guy's a heavyweight. Yeah. It's like being sent up to the Yankees when, you know, you've been playing, you know, wiffle ball or something with your friends on the street. So that was mind-blowing, the power that he played with. And also how hard he was listening and how he was leading and following you at the same time. And he was like in your thing the whole time. At first, that was extremely intimidating, and I felt like, how am I going to survive this? Every time he's done with a solo, it's my turn. It's just a trio. Yeah. Whew. So I really dove in. You know, I went, okay, I was like, you know, we were doing some little gigs. There's a little documentation of this period. That there's a couple of nights that we did at this place called Hilario's down in San Diego. And those were the first gigs after the rehearsals. And that was put out as you can find that on iTunes actually, but it's real early. And I was playing a 4-string and I was playing acoustic. And I remember after a while playing the music, and then, you know, we learned Got a Match and all these tunes and everything. And I started to think, because I had been listening to Anthony too, I was kind of thinking, wow, I think this is trio. I have to be the other soloist. Maybe the 6-string would be cool because nobody plays like Anthony. There's no danger of me being a clone because nobody can play like Anthony anyway. So I didn't worry about that because he's so ridiculous, right? So great. But I knew that I wanted to use it a little differently than Anthony too.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted to walk on it and like really play jazz on it, but also I knew it would, the low string, you know, at that time Chick had all these synths, and I was thinking, I want to play the low notes in this band. I don't want the synth to play lower notes than I can play. I'm the bass player. So the low B was appealing. And then the high C was like, I was already way into tenor players, transcribing and all that. So I was like, this is perfect. It'll be like my tenor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you added more texture to your palette there. Yeah,
it wasn't a technical decision at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was only for the music that was being presented to me. I felt like this instrument is a better orchestrational choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't afford it at the time. And I went to Chick and I said, you know, there's this thing I want to get. And what happened was we played in the spring, and then the summer he went out with Miroslav and Roy.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the summer free. So I went out with Sanborn and was playing all that Marcus Miller music on my white 1964 jazz bass at the time. Playing and singing background vocals and doing the whole thing. You know, that was the last time I sang professionally was 1985. I was singing high harmonies and dancing with Hiram Bullock, and it was great. But on that tour, we did go to New York, and I went to Ken Smith and I played a 6-string. I went, you know, this is what I need this, and I ordered one. But then I was like, I don't know I'm going to pay for this thing. And I went to Chick, and he said, no problem. We'll just take it out of your check every week for a while, and then you'll pay it off.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be on the road a lot. And it worked out great. So he fronted me the money for that 6-string bass. Not only did he inspire me to choose it, he bought it for me initially, you know, and I paid it along. So he did a lot of things like that for me. He was a mentor, and he introduced me to Herbie.
Mm-hmm.
The very first gig I did with him, he introduces me to Herbie, who's also my hero. And then the next year was 1986. We played this tour called Chick, Wayne, and Al, and it was Chick's band, and Wayne had just formed that band with Gary Willis and Berklee and I think Tom Canning, but then Mitch Foreman was in the band. And they were playing the music from Atlantis. We went on the road together, and Al Di Meola would open the show, solo guitar. So I got to meet Wayne on that tour, and then in '87 I played on Wayne's record Phantom Navigator. So that unlocked this whole other world that became later on huge for me.
Well, it seems like you got exactly what you wanted when you said you wanted to play with Chick Corea, was that you wanted to be able to expand both on electric and upright.
And I had no idea how that was going to work.
Yeah.
But God gave me these opportunities, and then all of a sudden I had a workshop, like I had a school. I could study both and really get my butt kicked all the time and learn how I wanted to approach those instruments. It became very clear. My decisions were easy to make because it was like, this is the music in front of me. No, I got to do this. Or I need to do this. I need to learn how to do this better. Chick was also very into the bow. He loved it when I played with the bow. So I said, okay, I'm going to work harder on that too.
Was it an easy transition for you to go from the 4-string electric to the 6-string?
I did it kind of recklessly. 2 weeks before the first major tour of the States and then Europe, I got the 6-string 2 weeks before it was ready, and it finally arrived. So basically it was trial by fire. Like, it came, I started using it in rehearsal, but I still had the 4-string too. And there's some, you see, and there's some videos in 1986 of us on the road, and there's I had a special stand built so that I could use both. I'd have a 4-string on, especially for slapping or whatever, and then I have the 6-string up on a stand for certain tunes. And then I was shedding all the time on the 6 at that point. I was still doing studio work, so I would play the 4 or whatever I needed to play, and I was playing double bass. But when I was on the road in my hotel room, I was shedding six string all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, when when we started going on the road, we'd go. I remember doing 2-month tours of Europe, one-nighters, on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Sleeper bus and everything, hotels, just shedding, flying here and there. I always had my six string. I shedded untold hours, just because I was desperate. I was like, man, I got to play.
Yeah.
Stuff would happen. Like I remember before, I don't even know if we had guitar in the band yet, but we're flying from LA to San Francisco one day, and I see Chick sitting next to me, and all of a sudden he breaks out manuscript. He starts writing, and I see all these eighth notes flying around on the page, and I asked him, "What is that?" He goes, "You'll see at sound check. I think we'll do it tonight." And so we get there, and it's all those shout chorus things for "Gotta Match." We were already playing Match,
Yeah.
but all of a sudden there are these crazy licks, and we did it that night. We actually played it. And I was freaking out because, I was a pretty good reader at that point, but man, that was technically, I had to find fingerings. And so we did it. We got through it. And then, that became something that there was a time in my life where you could wake me up at 3:00 in the morning and throw water in my face, and I could play all that stuff without even thinking. It was just in my hands. Yeah. We played so many gigs, hundreds of gigs every year, that was nothing. Mm-hmm. Because we were sort of, we were brought into Chick's world, and Chick technically had no limits. Mm. So we had to chase that all the time, so that was a good thing to chase.
Well, yeah, and working with somebody who has no limits, I mean, does it get tiring for you mentally, physically?
I think for me, I was so young and excited. My dream came true, so I didn't really care.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, I'll practice until I drop,
Yeah.
Which was necessary, obviously, because you're chasing somebody like Chick Corea. I mean, can you imagine being 25 years old and then you get this gig, this is your dream gig, and then you get there and find out that you're not really strong enough yet to deal with that onslaught. I mean, even though you've played with a lot of people and he thinks you should be there, which is great.
Yeah.
But in order for you to function like you really want to function in the band, you're gonna have to bust your butt, because those insane greatest solo ever played is going to happen on every tune when he's playing.
Yeah.
Every time he touches the keyboard, you're going to hear the greatest solo you ever thought, more than you could even imagine over those changes, and then you're going to have to play.
Yeah.
So that was great, and then to go from that later and then go into Wayne's World on top of that was incredible.
Yeah, that's a difference.
Another watershed. Okay, you're gonna have to learn something brand new now.
Yeah, I like what you said too. Playing with Chick because of his comping caused you to. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't be aware, but okay, I need to play melodies. I need to play convincing melodies.
Yeah. Strong. I need to, when I state a melody, it has to be like I really mean it. It can't just be like I'm noodling or, and so I was, because, and maybe it's no coincidence, I have the same birthday as Puccini. Actually, Puccini and Bottesini.
Oh, cool.
That's a pretty good birthday to have.
Yeah.
But Puccini in particular was so melodic. Actually, Bottesini was too. They were both, opera madmen. So I was always into melody, and the nicest thing that anybody ever, the nicest nickname that Chick used to say very sweet things to me, but my favorite was, in the last 10 years or whatever, he would have a lot of nice nicknames for me, but he started calling me the poet laureate of the band. And that was like, because I always wanted to play really, especially also when I started playing with Wayne, his melodies were so powerful. He could play 2 notes and you'd be crying.
Yeah.
And so there was when I was younger and playing with Chick, we were, I was into my, I wanted to play like a tenor player on the bass, and I still like that too. But when I started playing with Wayne, there was a shift that happened in the 90s with me, and I'd be on the stage with him, and he would play two notes, and you would start, you want to cry.
Mm-hmm.
And I played with Chick and learned how to negotiate and play stronger and be melodic and rhythmic, but I needed to learn how to make people cry with two notes.
Yeah.
And that was important to me because of my hearing opera and my cultural background. I'm sort of this Italian American kid who was adopted into African American culture
Mm-hmm.
and welcomed and taught and mentored by all these phenomenal men and women of that world.
Mm-hmm.
So Chick too was the same. He's an Italian American who was adopted into that world, and he really embraced that calling, almost, you could call it. So at a certain point when I was with Wayne, I had been around the world a bunch of times and realized, no, I'm not as into just trying to show people I can play and make the changes and blow and be strong. I want to make people cry like Wayne. Like Wayne goes, ah, and you go, ah, you're dead. And that's what happened when I started playing with Wayne in the 90s. We were playing all those tunes from Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all through composed, and then the blowing was one chord.
Yeah.
And he would carve these solos that were just genius. It's like Mount Everest.
Yeah.
Terri Lyne Carrington was playing drums, killing. We started playing together, and Mitch Foreman was playing. So it was very powerful. Then I started really, it was impressed upon me, these watershed moments where he would play, and I would be right next to him because I was playing electric, and he'd play the solo of Doom that ended the world, and he'd look at me and go, want some? And I would be like, oh, no. And he said, come on, go. He used to call me, he could say, go, Paganini, go. And he was joking around with me, but part of it was like messing with me a little bit to challenge me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the other part was like a loving father. He really was good to me.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of like my second dad. He became, Again, somebody I heard when I was 10 or 8, playing Children of the Night with Art Blakey, and that soaring sound like really touched me. I had no idea what anybody was doing, but that really kind of made a dent in me, So that was sort of my second like awakening. I felt it just blew my head off. Like, this guy, he can play sheets of sound. He can play one note. He's going to get you.
Yeah.
You're going to be moved.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I said, I want to be like him, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
But at first it was really daunting. Like, it was like, I'm never going to be able to do that.
Did you ever occur to you, like, I can't do that because I play the bass, or was it more of an internal thing?
It wasn't so much the bass, because the bass to me, like I had heard people shatter boundaries on the bass. In my generation was when, we heard Stanley do all that crazy stuff on both instruments. We had Gary Carr, showed us that you could play cello, all that stuff. He was before Edgar.
Yeah.
Edgar's more in my generation. So my generation also spawned people like Edgar, and, it's like, you hear that and you go, okay, I quit, So I was used to being challenged on my instrument and embracing those challenges and going, wow, this is cool. But it was more like, I knew it could be done on the bass because I heard people really stretch on the bass that were older than me. But what I didn't hear was, so I started working on my sound in a different way too, on the electric and the acoustic. I wanted my sound to have that emotional depth where if you played a note or two, people would be moved by the sound. Mm-hmm. Not just that you could get around and you knew the instrument.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what took me, and obviously that's already been, the mid 90s, that's 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, I just turned 62, like
Unbelievable.
about a month ago, a little less than a month ago. So I was always the young guy in every band.
Mm-hmm.
For years. I was the kid. Always, oh yeah, the kid, just show it to the kid, he'll learn it,
Yeah.
And then it became, I wasn't the youngest anymore, and now I'm never the youngest in any band.
Well, now you could take on that role, shepherding people and.
I try, and I enjoy doing it. I still, you still, no matter where you get to in your life, you still look at these people that you heard when you were young, and you go, these guys are men and women. Like for me, I'll give you for instance, I haven't played with that many famous singers, but I got to play. I was friends with Natalie Cole, and she was amazing. And I got to play with Nancy Wilson once, which was like, that was insane. And we really hit it off. It was really cool. She said, well, I hired Buster Williams when he was a young man. I was like, wow, I know.
Yeah.
And she was so cool. She was like, I listen to the bass. That's what I listen to. I was like, wow, and so she was incredible. We played on one of those Thelonious, it used to be called the Thelonious Monk Institute, now it's the Herbie Hankcock Institute, but one of those gala things, and she sang, I got to play with her, and we did Round Midnight, but she did it in B flat minor, the first and only time that I did it in another key like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was amazing. She's another one of my heroes, big heroes. Like that happened, I was like, okay, I'm good now. I can die.
Well, John, I have two small questions for you. One, what was the first, what's like your first musical memory of hearing something that really struck you, that really interested you, as I'm sure when you were a kid?
I think the really early, what made me, I think, also want to play the bass. My brother's a guitar player, and I tried to play the guitar a little bit, but it just didn't feel good. I'm lefty, and I play righty, and the pick was no way. But then I heard two songs. We were totally into the Beatles too. We loved, we wore out Abbey Road record. And then I'm a huge fan of the other ones too. I love Rubber Soul and Revolver and all the records, and my family and I just watched the Get Back series. Amazing. So, but the thing that really shook me was hearing Jamerson. I didn't know his name yet. I heard two songs. One was For Once in My Life, and I remember crying as a kid once he played the harmonica solo, which just made me cry. It was so good. And I Was Made to Love Her. Those two, and those were both Jamerson, undoubtedly. The way he played, it was so powerful, so grooving, so I would say purposeful. Like he knew what he was about, and he knew that he carried that music on his shoulders. He was it, on those records. So that blew me away. That was a watershed. And then when I heard Children of the Night, Wayne, also that was another big one. I always remember Wes Montgomery, the records he did with Ron and Herbie, and the ones with California Dreamin' Down Here on the Ground. Those were in a box of records that my grandfather brought home one day when we were kids in New York. So hearing Wes play like Sonny or something too, killed me. I was like, in the same box there was an Oscar Peterson record with Ray Brown on one side and Sam Jones on the other. It was called Blues Etude. Yeah, it might have been a reissue. I don't know what it was, but so I heard Ray very early on, and my mentor got me, Chris Paler. He got me into the Oscar Peterson, the one live in Chicago that has Chicago on it and all those cool arrangements. Hearing Ray was a big deal too, and Ron. And
that leads me to, I have one extra question then to ask.
You got as many as you want.
So did you saw Ray live?
Yes. When I was in the Bay Area, he used to play at the Concord Jazz Festival.
Yeah.
And I saw him play. And, he was incredible. Like, what a high bar he, even in the 40s when he was a young man in bebop, he definitely raised the bar. Him, people like him and Sam Jones or Percy Heath, they, the bar was raised from the original guys, that played on some of those records that we hear, where the bass solo kind of just like, treading water. And then all of a sudden Ray Brown, it's like, what? His command of the instrument, his swing, his power, his intention. And I did get to know him over the years. And towards the end, sadly, we got to know each other. And he said some very kind things to me one night. I went to see him. And after he passed, because I used to joke with John and Christian and say, well, if you ever want to make a super bass a quartet, please call, and they would laugh. And we did wind up doing Super Bass Trio, a tribute to Ray at Monterey Festival.
I saw that. Yeah, it was
some
there.
time back. That was a blast. But after Ray passed, John, because John and I have stayed friends since I was 19, he said, he was going to call you. And I was like, he wanted to do something with you. He meant it, I was like, because we sat, one night we were in, this was years ago when Danilo and I did a bunch of playing with Roy Haynes. We had a trio for a while. It was Roy's trio.
Yeah.
Hugely, that was a watershed moment for me. That was when I was like, I guess I really am a jazz bass player, because he liked my feel. I was like, okay, it's graduate school, in jazz. So we were playing somewhere. We were playing at the King Cat Theater in Seattle. And that week, Ray was playing at the Jazz Alley with his trio and a singer, and was it Ernestine Andrews or Ernie?
Ernie Andrews.
Ernie Andrews. Because I know he used to do it with Ernestine Anderson and different singers. He'd always have. So I went to see him, and we hung out on the break, and he goes, yeah, I said, man, maestro, wow. Like, he would say, yeah, I have to have the strings a little lower than I used to, but I said, man, you sound amazing. And he said, well, it's on you guys now. You got to carry it. You got to carry the tradition. He was like telling me, he said, and he said nice things about my playing or whatever. He said stuff in the magazines too, and so did Ron. And when those two guys, I think for me as a young bass player, their sort of stamp of approval meant everything. Everything, So the fact that he really was serious about maybe doing something eventually was a huge deal for me. So when it finally sort of happened in tribute to him at that thing that you saw, we had the greatest time playing. It was fun. The rehearsals were fun.
Oh, it was one of my favorite concerts, live things I've ever gotten to see.
Oh, thank you. Well, those guys they're amazing. And they have that we all three have that shared love of Ray. And those guys got in tight with him, though. I mean, when I was coming up, Ray was, basically John Clayton was like a son. He was the most close, I think, of any of us. I didn't get to, because I was on the road so much, even though I lived in LA, I was on the road so much that I didn't, like an idiot, I never thought, well, let's just bug him until he lets me come to his house. I didn't. I was so in awe of him still, even though I would run into him on the road. He was really nice. I just was like, but those other guys were in tight, and Christian got in there too. I mean, they were very close. Yeah. So to play with them and make a tribute to Ray was a big deal.
Yeah. The last question, John, is, it seems like you've been busy since you got a bass in your hands so many years ago. So how do you find a balance between touring and recording and writing music and your family, and how do you make it work?
I wish I knew, but by the grace of God, I like to say, I'm really involved also in my church. I've always been, since I was about 17, I think I started really getting involved. My brother's a pastor too. So, but we are very much the kind of Christians who are involved in social justice and in trying to address, not only the social issues of racism and and bias. So I guess you would call us lefty. But we're very serious about it, though. And my brother's, like I said, he's one of my biggest heroes. And so I've been a deacon and an elder in churches. Right now, I've been involved in a new church, and they just called me to sort of join their elder thing. So I've been going through, a process of praying about it and all that too. So that's been a stabilizing influence in my life, my faith, and also the idea that God allowed my dreams to come true, and the least I can do is serve people, and really, because, I still can't believe what happened, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to be cute. It's really true. I sometimes I go, I came from a family of 5. My father grew up poor. His father was an immigrant from Italy, and there were 11 kids. So there was no connection to the world of music, and there was no in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that grounding helps me sort of prioritize what's important. And my wife is amazing. I had a young marriage. My problem, I think, when I was younger, I was trying to grow up too fast, and I wanted to settle down and have a family. I didn't enjoy, like some musicians who are kind of wild and they want to have all these different experiences. I really didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I got married too young, and it didn't work out very well. I stayed in it because of and didn't want to quit, and I was faithful. I stayed in for like 9 years, and it didn't work very well. So I was kind of beat up after that, and was like, how am I going to find somebody who is really wants to grow spiritually, but also understands the music, and is willing to deal with all that. Of course, my wife's a great cellist, and she went to Eastman, and she totally understood from the beginning. And so she's my manager. We play together. She's on my records. We just did a thing for Jazz Night in America.
I saw that,
honoring, the people who passed. She's incredible, and also not only incredible as a partner in life, but as a mom too. She's been like amazing for our daughters, So, and I really respect her as a musician. She's amazing. When we first started dating, it was hilarious because, I was a pretty good reader. I was in the studios. We started getting together. We would fool around and read through some stuff. Bob Mintzer had this thing where he had all these etudes that he had written a book, and we would read through them. And she was smoking me under the table. She was reading like a fiend,
Yeah.
And in fact, we were both in the studios in LA. Like, she only lived in LA about 3 years, but her friend that went to Eastman with her got her in, and she was burning. Like, she was already playing on Star Trek and all these things. And but she's incredible, and so I think that's a big part of how it all kind of works, because we're very much a team.
Yeah.
And she helps me with a lot of things, like, because I'm sort of sometimes the mad professor in the studio, just writing and going practicing writing and teaching and all this crazy stuff. She is when it was kind of tricky, because when we first got together, and she had been married before too, so she said, I really want to have children. We were living in LA. She said, I think we should move back to New York. And I was petrified. I was like, New York, are you kidding? Ron and Buster and you name it, every era. There's more bass players in LA than if you throw a rock, you'll hit a great jazz bass. So I was really scared, and she was like, come on, we can do this. I think we need to go there. She's a visionary too. She really understands. So, of course, we did, and it was the greatest thing we ever did.
Yeah.
But I called a lot of people before that. I was freaking out. I was scared. But what kind of changed my mind was when she said, well, you want to have kids too, right? And she said, she said, my clock's ticking. I want to have children. Do you want a family? I said, yeah, I've always wanted one. So she said, do you want to raise them out here, or do you want to go back east? And that was kind of what did it. I was at a point in life, and that I wanted to go home.
Yeah.
and I never thought I would get to, because my ex-wife was a California, died in the woods, never was going to happen.
Yeah.
So I gave up on that idea, and I was afraid. So many of my favorite bass players lived in New York.
Yeah. So
I was like, they don't really need me to go there. It's not like I'm gonna show up and everybody's gonna go, oh, you know. So, but I did call Mike Brecker and all these people and all these drummers like Billy Hart and everything, and they said, you know, you should just come.
Yeah.
You belong here. You know, you love this music. You're committed to it. And Ron was great. He said, you know, when I first moved to New York, I was scared too. He said, and Sam Jones said, you know, you should come. He said, in New York, there's always room for another one who's serious about this music, who really.
Yes.
So I did it, and it was reckless. I mean, I was established out there, had tons of work and everything. So that's how, you know, my wife is a big part of why things are settled in my life at this point. And obviously my faith, both of our faith is the number one thing, and then our love for each other is a big deal. And our children, we have 2 daughters, and that was hard too, because we lost babies before we had the 2. So that was also, again, where I saw how incredibly strong my wife is, because, you know, we had a miscarriage and a stillbirth at 38 weeks, a full-grown baby that went before we could deliver her. So my wife was so strong through that. She, you know, we got through that, and I was like, okay, we can adopt. We never have to go through this again. I never want to see you, because it's one thing for me, but this is all happening within you.
Yeah.
I don't want you to ever have to deal with that ever again. I was distraught.
Yeah.
And I had no power to change anything, right? That stability and what we share is like far beyond whatever I thought was possible. Because I thought, you know, I always had bad luck, frankly, with relationships, because I wasn't somebody who was good at playing games, and I always wanted to just settle down and have fun. I was very naive in many ways, let's just say. Then I met her, and I had given up. I thought, okay, after the first one, I was like, okay, I'm never going to find somebody, you know, I'm going to be, you know, alone, I think, you know. And now I don't really dig that, but I think that's probably going to happen that way. Because I didn't think I was going to find somebody who was okay with both ideas about growing spiritually and the music scene, and, you know, all that it entailed, and still willing to juggle and try to do. But she was willing. See, the big thing too was she wanted to have children, and she knew she wanted that. So she actually sacrificed some of her career stuff to do that. Yeah. And before we went that direction, I said, do you really want to do that? I mean, is that, I'm not okay with you having to do that. Yeah. Unless you really want to do it that way. Because at that point, you know, I had all this work, and we were sort of being supported by all that. So, but I didn't want it to be that as a default, you know, paternal kind of thing. Well, you know, I'm the man. I'm the breadwinner, you know, because she's an incredible musician, but she had mixed feelings about which place her ultimate priority was going to land. And so, and in truth, she's managed to do both to a degree. Yes, maybe she's not touring with a group, but she plays a lot of music still, and she's done a lot of stuff over the years. There have been times where she was, you know, wish she was doing more. Yeah. And that was hard, you know, but lately, the last couple of years, we've been doing a lot together again. It's great. Yeah. Brings back. I like, yeah. It's just kind of, and she's really into our daughters, obviously, as I am. So that is something that she feels a real pull. Certain people, they don't have that pull, so they don't necessarily need to have kids.
Well, it helps when you like your children.
Yeah. 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 One of them's in LA. She's a singer-songwriter. She's a great musician.
Oh, cool.
She's a character too. She has a lot of broad talents. So Yeah, she's also a photographer now too, which she didn't used to do before, but mainly she's a musician. Yeah.
Well, John, this has been fantastic. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. This has been so much fun. Kind of like you said, like your mom said, well, he's just my John. That's kind of like you summed it up all yourself, with balance. It's like you're just you, and that's how you do it all. And you're inspiring to me for sure because of all the different music you play and your technique and your dedication to the music and the instrument itself, and you're inspiring to so many other people. So thank you so much for taking the time and just being John.
Well, thank you for having this show. This is cool.
Oh yeah, I'm having a blast. Yeah, and you mentioned some people. I mean, John Clayton's been on, and Scott Colley, and I learn a ton, and other people learn a bunch too. And I think it's we learn from. There's a lesson to be learned everywhere, I think. So I appreciate you sharing.
And also David Schwartz.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that guy.
Yeah. Another sweetheart, another mad scientist.
Yeah. Oh boy, and broadly talented too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can do a lot of stuff. Boy. Anyway, so thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, John. And I'll let you know when this goes up. But thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for asking. It was fun. I hope I get to hear you play out there sometime.
Oh yeah, when all this is over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with all that too. All your playing and your writing, and the things that you're pointing towards.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Thanks, John.